only way to get through grief is to grieve. We have to allow those emotions to run their course, because eventually that emotional energy will deplete itself.
When it comes to grief, the only healthy way out is through. Our guest, Bereavement Counselor Brent Thomas, talks about that and much more on this episode of Silver Ladder.
You're listening to Silver Ladder, a podcast built on real-life, inspiring stories of those who have faced and overcome challenges related to mental health, addiction, recovery, grief, parenting, and much, much more. Real, raw, relatable. Silver Ladder.
Welcome to Silver Ladder. I'm Shane Watson, mental health educator and consultant. Before we meet today's guest, it's important to note the Silver Ladder podcast may contain mature content, including explicit language and references to topics such as drug use, suicide, or violence. This show is intended for adults only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by guests of the show are their own and not necessarily the views of the host. Sharing them does not constitute an endorsement by the Silver Ladder Podcast or Silver Ladder LLC. Likewise, nothing shared on the show is intended to replace professional advice. As always, consult your physician, attorney, licensed counselor, and local record store owner before making any personal changes or decisions. Our guest today is Brent Thomas. Brent is a family man, former pastor and chaplain, music lover, book absorber, and bereavement counselor. He joins us now on Silver Ladder. Brent, welcome to the show, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thanks so much, Shane. It's good to be here.
I've been giving backstories on my guests so far on the show when there is a prior connection between me and them. Brent and I both attended Grand Canyon University together. You wrote something very interesting in my yearbook, by the way. Not necessarily cringeworthy, as the kids would say, but interesting. And we knew each other at Grand Canyon University back in the 90s. Then, actually, at one point, I attended a church that you pastored. You are the individual who baptized me. And then also, I think it's worth noting, very worth noting to me, you are one of the individuals that was willing to come speak at my sentencing. And I am, to this day, I am incredibly grateful. Every year when February 10th rolls around, I am reminded of it. I have it on my calendar, so thank you so much for that.
It's my privilege.
So speaking of that connection, going to Grand Canyon University together, what was your major in college there? I knew you there, but I didn't know what you were majoring in. And what credentialing or training did you seek and or receive beyond that?
Sure. So my bachelor's is actually in public relations. I think technically it was a communications degree, but emphasis in public relations. After that, I went to seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, where I got my master's of divinity. Then after that, I pastored for about 15 years, transitioned, which we'll probably talk about here in a minute, but transitioned into chaplaincy. From there, there's a training called clinical pastoral education. So I did 4 units of that, but did not pursue board certification. So I could become a board certified chaplain if I just want to jump through that final hoop, and for now have chosen not to. I just finished at Grand Canyon a second master's degree, and just passed the national licensing exam, and I'm just waiting on the state of Arizona for my counseling license, and then I'll be a licensed associate counselor as well.
Is there an area of counseling you're looking to specialize in? And that may be exactly what we're about to get into here in a minute. What is the area you're looking to focus on?
Grief and bereavement is where my heart is. I do family counseling, I do individual counseling, I do all kinds, but my heart's with grief.
What led you specifically to where you are now, which is hospital and hospice chaplaincy? Was there something about that that appealed or attracted you more than doing ministry in a traditional church setting?
Absolutely. And, you know, everyone has different experiences with church and with pastors, but when I served as a pastor, my experience with hurting people was that they often wanted an answer man. They all wanted, what does the Bible say? Tell me a specific verse. Whereas as I transitioned into chaplaincy, it's much more of a companion model. You're there to companion them. You're there to be with them. If they want, you're there to help them transition up Maslow's hierarchy as much as they can and are willing to, but it's much less directive. It's much more based on empathy, relationship, rapport, whereas a lot of people go to their pastor just because they have a position.
So you are walking with them. You're walking beside them rather than lecturing or telling them this is what you need to do.
Exactly.
And in my work in mental and behavioral health over the last 12 years, I've seen that's what works. Very rarely does an answer or a solution fix it. We often can't fix people's problems.
Exactly.
And a lot of times they're not expecting us to. Sometimes they are.
Right.
But what can really begin healing is when that person feels heard, they feel listened to, they feel understood, which obviously you know that.
Exactly, yeah. So that's been my trajectory, just more towards that approach, that model.
Do you work solely with family members who have already experienced a recent loss, or do you work with individuals in a hospice situation and their family who are approaching the likelihood of a passing in the near future?
Right. No, that's the latter, working with the patients and the families. That's more of the chaplain role.
Okay.
And so my primary role with hospice is bereavement counselor. So in that scenario, I work specifically with the family. I have chaplained, but I don't currently fill that role.
So bereavement is the word that you would use. So that's like post-passing with the loved ones that remain
Exactly.
afterward.
We are bereaved of that person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there are things that modern society or Western society, I guess, could do differently or better when approaching the topic of dying? If so, what?
Oh, how much?
Because we don't talk about it. That's one thing. There's going to be people that when they see the title of this episode, they're specifically going to shy away from it because it's like, oh, we can't talk about that.
Exactly. And I think you just hit the nail on the head right away. Over the years, particularly in America, we've outsourced death. It used to be typical. It used to be common to die at home, surrounded by
That's
family.
how I want to go.
Exactly.
No other way.
Which is partly why I love hospice, because we give people that option. But I think one, like you just said, normalize talking about death. I think a deeper layer also is we have to normalize emotions. Talking about emotions, accepting emotions. I don't know how you were raised. I was raised that emotions are weakness. And if grief takes us through emotions and you believe emotions are weakness, you're not going to grieve very well. And so, with that in mind, maybe if I could turn the table a little bit and just ask you, what is grief? How would you define it?
I like this. Wow. I was not expecting to be interviewed today. What is grief? That is a broad question. Grief is an emotion. Grief is a feeling that I would pretty quickly associate with loss.
Yes.
Now, sometimes it can be a loss in terms of a death. There was a physical fatality, a loss.
Right.
I believe grief can happen at the end of a relationship.
Yep.
I believe grief can happen when someone has lost their sense of purpose.
Yep.
So I think grief can be pretty broad. Now, I didn't define it, though. I said situations in which it can apply. Oh, I did start to. I said it's an emotion where I feel where there is a sense of loss, and I associate grief with an aching. Ooh. Not a stabbing pain, but an aching. So now I want to ask you, you're the grief guy.
Sure.
What is grief?
Well, there are lots of definitions, and there are several good ones. But as far as I know, I coined this one, and it's a little generic, it's a little textbook, but bear with me because I think it's a helpful starting place. Grief is our natural emotional response to any significant loss or change. So you were right on track.
So I said emotion and I said loss.
Yep. So grief is our natural emotional response to any significant loss or change. So one key there is significant.
And I like the word natural response.
It's what's not natural is trying to avoid it, trying
Stuff
to
it.
Yep. The only way to get through grief is to grieve.
By the way, I want to back up really quickly to what you said about hospice and how traditionally, before modern society, people passed at home. And that's why you like hospice so much. My father died of cancer a couple years ago, and he did home hospice.
Okay.
And it was about as good as it could be. And I looked at that and it made me think about my own mortality. And it made me think of when my day comes, I want to be at home.
Right.
And I know that there's situations where people say, well, if we put you in a hospital situation, we could probably get you another 2-3 months.
Right.
To me, it's at what cost, though. That is a quantity over quality issue.
You just hit the nail on the head. The core of the hospice philosophy is to help you die with dignity, to help you die as comfortably as possible.
And that's something that everyone is owed, I feel.
Absolutely.
I think everyone should be able to have that. And what it also does, like I think of my dad with his stage 4 cancer. Cancer took a lot of his autonomy and his choice from him.
Right.
But he was able to make the choice that this is where I want to be.
Exactly.
And if we can restore autonomy and control and choice to someone whose life has been robbed of those things, then we are truly loving our neighbor at that point. So I wanted to ask you, in the field that you are in, what abilities or attributes are most important when helping someone going through grief, loss, bereavement? How do you approach that situation? Because I'm sure there are plenty of non-professionals hearing this who would like to know how to handle situations like that.
Well, let's build up to that and go back to our definition.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind, if we could
Please do.
Dwell there for a second. So grief's our naturally emotional response to any significant loss or change. As we discussed, it's natural, it's emotional, it's not logical, it's not linear, it doesn't happen in steps or stages. So grief's our natural emotional response to any significant loss or change. And I always follow that up by saying emotions are energy. And so what do you think happens if we bottle up energy for too long?
It's going to get released at some point somehow.
Exactly. And I tend to think of it maybe sort of like a spectrum. And so when I talk with people through this, I repeat myself a lot. So you're going to hear me repeat some things. One is name, experience, release. We'll unpack that in a second. But if we don't do that well, one option is that we're going to explode. Many people have heard the saying, hurt people. Yeah, and grief hurts. And so if we're not handling it well, we're not dealing with that emotional energy well, one option is that we're going to explode. It could just be snark, sarcasm. It's generally geared at those closest to us, right? We hurt the ones we love. Could be a little more passive aggressive, where we just keep people out at an arm's length. Hopefully it doesn't end up in an actual explosion. Over the years, I've had clients get in fist fights. I've had clients be in road rage incidents. Several years ago, I was working with a woman. She was older, but sharp as a tack. And she called me one day, in the middle of the day. I was in between clients, happened to be able to answer, and she's hysterical. And she says, Brent, I was just in a road rage incident, and it was me. And so sorry if this is what you drive. This is just how she described it to me. She says, you know those big, dumb, lifted trucks that are everywhere in Phoenix?
Yes.
Yes, I do. Well, I tried to run one off the road in my Prius. What's wrong with me? So, we had to talk about you exploded.
Yes.
But as I mentioned, I think of it like a spectrum. And so on the other end of the spectrum, again, if we don't name, experience, release in healthy ways, the opposite of explode is what?
Implode.
Right. And on that end of the spectrums where we might tend to have some self-destructive thoughts, behaviors, both. It could look like anything: eat too much, sleep too much, drink too much, isolate too much. I mean, you name it. I've had clients go there. This is often where we think of vices, where we do try to numb, we do try to deal with it in unhealthy ways. It could be physical symptoms. Many, many clients over the years have told me they're in physical pain associated with their grief. Illness, grievers get sick a lot.
I believe it. I'm assuming insomnia, sleeping, not sleeping enough, sleeping too much.
Absolutely.
Weight gain, weight loss.
All of the above. Yeah. I'm not a proud person, so I don't mind telling you I was kicked out of high school physics. they literally, please don't come back.
You are one of my people.
Now, I ended up with AP Bio, so everything worked out well.
This sounds like my experience in Algebra 3-4 trig.
Oh, don't get me started on algebra. But I remember from physics, energy always does something. Energy doesn't disappear. It always does something. So, it could manifest in physical symptoms and illness, could be depression. And I always like to pause there and remind people grief and depression are not the same things.
True.
They often go together. but they are not the same thing. And I don't mind sharing depression as part of my own life.
Actually, I think that thank you for doing that, because part of what we're doing here is we're sharing on this show as a whole, not just your episode, lived experience. So let you talk about that, because I think it's important for people to hear about that.
It is. At least at a diagnosed level, it's been over 30 years. I know it's been longer than that. I'm not currently on medication. I have been. I probably will be again. That's okay. But the distinguishing factor for this conversation is that grief tends to be a constant that doesn't change regardless of our circumstances. Emptiness, fogginess, hopelessness, weariness. For me, it's like a hopelessness. I don't want to get out of bed, have no motivation, have no interest. And oftentimes it's even like the world kind of goes black and white. But the key is that it's a constant. Whereas grief tends to come and go like waves. And not everyone, but that's how most of us tend to experience it. And so there, the question becomes, well, what do we do with it? How do we move through this in healthy ways so that we don't either explode or implode? And so there, sometimes we'll know what triggers a wave. A song on the radio,
seeing a picture of that person,
a scent, even sometimes just a memory. Other times we don't even know what's triggered it. I don't know, standing in the checkout line at Walmart, here come the ugly cries. It's
absolutely.
Like,
I've had that happen.
Yeah, me too.
Random Tuesday.
Exactly.
It's not a specific date.
Nope. Right. So the key then becomes we want to try to practice, and I don't care if you call it self-awareness, I don't care if you call it mindfulness. Both of those words are thrown out a whole lot these days with very little agreement what they mean. So I use the word mindfulness, and I define it as simply paying attention to yourself in the moment on purpose.
Without judgment.
There you go. Thank you. Yep, exactly.
Because it is hard to address a feeling, an emotion, whether it is grief or whatever. It's hard to do anything with it, to find a healthy way to release it.
Exactly.
If we're not even aware that we are feeling it. We get so much in autopilot in modern society that we don't slow down enough to recognize, okay, what is it that I am feeling?
Yep.
What can I do about it?
Exactly. And to top that off, most of us have been raised to believe that emotions are weakness. Our society is not good. And so if you believe emotions are weakness, and I have defined grief as an emotional process, the only way to get through grief is to grieve.
That is one of the things. So you've hit on another thing that we're really trying to do with this show as a whole, not just your episode, is to make it clear that being a human being and experiencing emotions, because, by the way, our prior episodes, we launched during Men's Mental Health Month last month.
Awesome.
And we talked about the fact that feeling grief or sorrow or depression or anger or confusion or whatever does not make you less of a man. Right. It doesn't make you less of a woman. It doesn't make you less of a person.
That's right.
And you said about your name, experience, release, that you were going to be repeating that.
We'll get back to that.
I have been repeating on so many episodes on here that thing that I just talked about with you. That does not make you less of a person.
That's right.
People are probably going to be sick of it, but as you probably know, with you repeating your message, there is a concept in mental and behavioral health known as dosage. It is a repetition of a message in order for it to fully sink in. So let me let you go from there. Continue with what you were saying.
So mindfulness, paying attention to yourself in the moment on purpose without judgment. So what we want to learn how to do, and this is an art, not a science. This is the ideal. It does not always play out this way. What we want to try to do is pay attention to ourselves so that we can sense a wave of grief when it's still a long ways out. Versus, did I take my glasses off? I've done this bad in the past. Versus when it just grabs you by the face, you're upside down, all you can do is gasp for air. We're still going to have those moments.
And you're in recovery mode at that point.
Exactly, yes, because it's also a traumatic experience.
Absolutely.
So what we want to try to do is sense those waves when they're far out. And then go back to our three things: name, experience, release. And
so it's about recognizing patterns, possible triggers.
Exactly. And paying attention to yourself, to the physical sensations associated with emotions. Most of us are not good at that. Different emotions have different physical sensations. So the first thing we want to try to do is name what emotions. Now let me ask you a trick question. Why might that be difficult?
Repeat the question if you don't mind.
Why? So we want to name the emotions a wave is bringing.
Okay.
Why might that be difficult?
Because emotions are often not cleanly categorized.
Right.
It's almost like a gradient
Yes.
kind of thing.
Not just that. But
Okay.
my own theory is that grief is not an emotion.
Wow.
Remember our definition, grief is an emotional response. So I picture...
So is trauma.
Exactly.
Trauma is not an event. Trauma is a response to an
Exactly.
event. Okay.
So grief, I picture it like an umbrella term. And honestly, I think it encompasses every emotion and conflicting emotions at the same time.
Absolutely.
So here comes a wave, and we want to try to name them. And so here comes a wave, and I'm so sad that they're gone, and I'm so angry at the situation. But do you remember that trip that we took? And it's all sort of bundled
And you've got
up.
a little bit of joy in there, and you're
Exactly.
like, why do I have this at the same time that I'm feeling the sadness?
Exactly. Now, the reason that becomes important, it's sort of layered, but one, if you just come to me and you say, Brent, I'm so emotional today, can you help me? Mate, I mean, I like to think I'm good at what I do, but if you come and you say, Brent, I'm so sad today, I'm so angry today.
You've defined it
exactly.
at that point. Okay.
And so now we can pull specific coping tools for sadness, specific coping tools for anger. Not only that, if we can try to identify the emotions, we're typically able to experience them a little more fully.
Which is good. I think that's part of that release.
Exactly.
Because we talked about the fact that if we keep stuffing that down and denying it, ignoring it, there's eventually going to be an explosion or an implosion.
Exactly.
Where if you release it bit by bit like a healthy pressure valve,
There you go.
you don't have that buildup.
There you go. Exactly. So we name those emotions. Then we have to experience them. Again, the only way to get through grief is to grieve. And then we try to release that emotional energy in healthy ways. Now, that can become difficult. But for a lot of people, natural criers, but more specifically, the people that get relief or release from crying, for them, name, experience, release, name and experience go hand in hand.
Okay.
Because as they have that big cry, they get that release. A lot of us are not natural criers. Not only that, a lot of people who do cry don't experience that release. So for us, for those people, we now have to find, how do you release emotional energy in healthy ways? What's good for you? So you name it. I've got clients. I mean, I've got marathon clients. I've got weightlifters. I've got MMA fighters, and then gardeners or crocheting.
Yeah,
or,
I get it.
Music, art. It's going to be different for every person, which is part of what keeps me in business, because I cannot just tell people how to grieve. I have to figure out, what does this look like for you?
It's not one size fits
Not
all.
at all.
And I tell people that too when I deal with people who are experiencing grief and loss. I mentioned, love earlier that you said it is nonlinear.
Right.
It's not one size fits all.
No.
Yeah, and that's important.
Exactly.
So you don't just have this boilerplate thing that you say, well, here's your list of
No.
things to do.
No.
You need to hear their story.
Exactly. Because we've got to find out what's going to be good for them. Because what helps one person release energy, emotional energy, may not help another one. So we've got to customize it every single time. But here's what happens. So here comes a wave, and we do our three things. We name, experience, release, and the wave goes out. Who knows how long till the next one? Could be a day, could be two, could be a week, could be, who knows? But here comes the next wave, and we do the same thing. And as we begin to habituate this, again, this is an art, not a science. This is the ideal, but the waves will tend to get less frequent and less intense. Now, I know people can't see my hands, but it's more like this in practicality, kind of up and down rather than just a nice, smooth trajectory. But that emotional energy eventually does exhaust itself. But that's not the end of it. Let me ask you another trick question.
I love it.
What do you think is the relationship between grief and love?
The more that you loved someone or something, the more that you are going to grieve when they or it is gone.
Absolutely.
To grieve mightily means you loved mightily.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I'm in the midst of that right now. I mean, we're 2 years on from losing my dad, but it's like, you talk about a big loss, and it does lessen over time, which you've kind of indicated a couple times, and it absolutely has lessened, but it's never fully going to go away. And you know what? I don't want it to.
There you go. You just hit the nail on the head. Now, eventually, it can become like a gentle lapping at our feet.
It is.
It's still there. The waves are still there, but they're not always like they are at the beginning.
That intensity.
And so, yeah, the physical relationship's just in a form we don't currently like. But that love, that union, that bond that we have for that person is still there. If we want to get snarky or sarcastic, and years ago I lost my patience with a client. I don't know if I should tell this. I don't know, but week after week, they would come in and just very bluntly, despite my trying to talk them through this, would ask, how long should I expect to grieve? When can I be done with this? And I say I lost my cool with them. It was just a snarky comment, but I looked at them and I said, well, do you really want to stop grieving, stop loving them? I've never once counseled that. I apologize to them, but we talked through that.
But it makes sense at the same time. I get where you feel that wasn't the most gentle response, but that's a valid answer.
Yeah.
How do you fully detach from the grief? You fully detach from how much you loved that person.
Exactly.
And you know what? I get that question. I get the person asking that question because there's those people that, maybe sometimes I'm that way, that like things very well defined for them.
Exactly.
And they like, a schedule and, a syllabus for grief. Mm-hmm. And grief is messy. It's, as we've said, nonlinear. Right. It can look like all manner of things.
That's right.
And that's so, I'm so glad that you're mentioning all these things, because I wrote questions for you knowing certain things about grief and bereavement myself, but you have broadened this so much that I'm so glad that we got into this. People need to hear this.
Thank you. But then, remember I said that wasn't the totality of it. As those waves get less frequent and less intense, now we move on to what might even be a little more difficult part of it. Who likes a good old existential crisis? Grief robs us of our sense of meaning, purpose, identity, especially the closer we were to a person, the more influence they had in our life. Now we have to reimagine ourselves.
Parent losing a child. I have seen that. Mm-hmm.
Because we tend to define ourselves by our roles. Mm-hmm. So people will, Brent, who are you?
You'll name your titles off. You'll name dad first.
Exactly. And I tell people, no, those are roles that I play.
Yep.
Those are not me. I was Brent before I was a dad.
Yeah.
And so the latter part of what we try to do so our first concern is let's get people through those waves in healthy ways. As those waves begin to get less frequent and less intense, then we move on to, we have to remake life. Back when I was with another hospice, I did a 4-week grief support group, and all 4 weeks were centered around a sentence by a woman named Roiphe. And she wrote a book called Epilogue. And it's really good. It's her journals, memoirs of when her husband passed away. But she's got one line in there where she says, grief is in 2 parts. The first is the loss, and the second is the remaking of life.
Because we can't go back to the way it was before.
Exactly. We have to adjust to the new normal. And so life is going to change, and we are going to change.
And that's where I'm such a huge fan of acceptance.
Yes.
We advocate acceptance in the recovery world a whole bunch.
Right.
I advocate acceptance in life in general.
Exactly.
And with grief, there's a big part of accepting the reality that person is gone. They're not going to be able to come back. So what do we do then?
Exactly. So if I could just share a practical tool.
Please do, because that's another thing. We want powerful stories on the show, but we want actionable steps, tangible tools that people can use. So please.
So I love that you brought up acceptance. So where I practice bereavement counseling with that hospice, we don't use the 5 stages of grief.
Okay.
A lot of hospices do, but they originally were not meant for the bereaved. They were meant for the patient who receives a terminal diagnosis. They have been retooled for bereaved, but generally, so if you think about the 5 stages, very, very number 1, denial. After we lose someone, we're not really in denial in that same sense. I think disbelief is a much better word. We expect them to come walk through the door. I used to call them every day. Oh, they're not there anymore.
I wanted to text my dad.
Exactly. But it's not quite denial in the sense of if you're that patient who receives that diagnosis. No, second opinion, no. We know they're gone. Or one of our other stages, bargaining. If we're that patient, whatever your religious beliefs are, God, universe, get me out of this, I'll do whatever. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. But after a loss, what are we bargaining?
That's really true. It applies very differently to the person that
Exactly.
received the health diagnosis versus the loved ones once they're gone. I've never thought of that.
So we use a tool called the 4 tasks of mourning. You'll sometimes see it, the 4 tasks of grief. And these were formulated by a gentleman named William J. Worden, W-O-R-D-E-N. And I don't like the word tasks, but he didn't ask me. I also think grief and bereavement, or grief and mourning, are very different. But again, he didn't ask me. But
Okay.
they're mostly known as the 4 tasks of mourning. And the way I was taught them was an acronym. And I was a pastor, so I love acronyms. So the way I was taught them is TEAR. So he says, there are 4 things. Grief does not happen in stages, doesn't happen in steps, but Worden says there's 4 things every griever needs to try to work through in order to move through this in a healthy way. And so TEAR, he says the first one is just to accept the reality of the loss. I had a client years ago say, you gotta come to know it in your knower. And I had never heard that before, but it made sense.
That's new to me, but it does make sense.
We have to accept the reality of the loss. And that right there these don't necessarily happen sequentially, but that one right there can be difficult. It's not quite that denial, but it's that disbelief. This is my new reality. And that's the TEAR, the E, experience. The pain of the grief.
And that ties into what you said about name, experience, release.
Exactly.
Okay.
The only way to get through grief is to grieve. We have to allow those emotions to run their course, because eventually that emotional energy will deplete itself. So TEA, we have to learn to adjust to the new world without our loved one. Things are going to change now. We're going to change now. We have to learn to adjust to the new normal. And we use that phrase, the new normal, because that doesn't mean we have to like it. But we have to learn to adjust. And then the R, oh my gosh, the way I was taught is really wordy. So just bear with me for a second.
All good.
So TEAR, to accept the reality, experience the pain of the loss, adjust to the new reality. And then the R, we have to learn to reinvent or reimagine ourselves while maintaining an enduring connection with our loved one. And to me, that while is so important. Because typically what happens is if we get to a place where the waves start to subside and we begin to move forward with life, and I use that very carefully, you'll never hear me use the phrase move on. That implies leaving someone or something behind. We don't move on from grief. We move through it. We move forward with it. But as we begin to move forward, and let's say, I don't know, depending on your circumstance, you allow yourself to laugh again, and all of a sudden there's that pang of guilt. Or if we move forward and begin to do new things, we feel guilty.
Am I allowed to do this?
Exactly. And that's not what we want. We want to learn how do we carry our love and our loss both forward in emotionally healthy ways. And so that brings us to the topic of memorializing our loved ones. And when we talk about memorializing them, people will typically think of things like tattoos are big. Years ago, I was working with a family and they had lost a son, but once a year they did a huge family portrait with aunts, uncles, grandpas, cousins. Everybody put his face on a t-shirt and wore it that year. People plant trees, do park benches.
May I tell you about a memorial?
Please.
Okay. It's back to my dad.
Yeah.
My dad's favorite movie was The Big Lebowski.
Oh, I love it.
So you know about Donnie's ashes in the Folgers can? So every year, twice a year for 14 years, my dad attended an event in Wickiup, Arizona called the Big Sandy Machine Gun Shoot.
Oh my gosh.
So people come out there and it's a big private range, a giant piece of private land, and people can shoot their rifles and their machine guns. There's even like a Gatling gun and an old cannon. They brought a tank one year.
Right.
He loved it. He really enjoyed doing that. He got to make so many friends there. So after he passed, my father was cremated after he passed. My cousins took some of his ashes in a Folgers can, specifically in homage to Big Lebowski.
I love it.
They got permission from the event organizers, and they announced that they were going to be doing this, and so many people recognize his name. They put it out there on the range with an exploding target on it. and they blew it up out there on the range, which my dad was like kind of an irreverent guy. He had that kind of sense of humor. And so to give an illustration to your fact that memorializing can look like all manner of things, this one's rather unique.
I love it.
So there is that.
I love it. I love it. And when we talk about memorializing in this specific way, I think we ought to step back a little bit, because what would our loved one have wanted for us? And if I could just share and I don't want to disparage anyone's religion, but if I can just share real quick, the only time that question has ever backfired on me, I was working with a woman and her twin sister had passed, and we were talking about what would she want for you going forward, and this woman's body language just changed. She sits up and she gets tense, and you could see her, and I'm like, oh no.
Wow.
And she says, don't ask me that question. I said, okay. And I backed off a little bit. And then she goes back to it and she says, do you really want to know? Well, yeah, of course I do.
I asked the question.
What caused that reaction? So she says, my sister, more than anything in the world, wanted me to become Jehovah's Witness. And there's no way in hell I'm doing that.
So it's honoring the wishes of the lost while maintaining your own healthy boundaries.
Exactly. And so what would they want? And the generic answer is they'd want us to be happy. They'd want us to find meaning, purpose again.
My dad would want you and I laughing about how he was memorialized.
And that's what we do.
Yep.
We seek our own happiness. We seek our own fulfillment in honor of them. The life we choose going forward becomes an everyday memorial to them. And so that's how we practically play that out.
Wow. This is, by the way, this is an incredible conversation, and this is the least I have referred to the questions I have written down, and I think that tells you how a conversation is going, where it's just flowing off of itself. I am so glad that you are here. I have a question about people who have not come to that point of loss yet. Mm-hmm. What about those who haven't yet experienced the loss, yet see it on the horizon? By that, I mean people who themselves are terminally ill, who have loved ones who are. How does the approach there differ from working with those who have already had the loss? What do you advocate? And by the way, one thing that I would say before I pass this over to you, make use of the time that you have with that person.
Exactly. And in those situations, it's what we call anticipatory grief. So it is still grief, but grief often happens in stages. Not quite in the way of Kubler-Ross was talking about, but anticipatory grief is grief before something happens. And so we do a lot of the same grief education, what it is, how you move through it, the name, experience, release, all of that. And then, like you said, we recommend practical steps for the here and now. Make the most of the time you have left.
That's what we have the power to do.
Exactly. If there needs to be amends, go make them.
Oh, that is so important. I mean, that's a big part of the recovery world that I live in. Mm-hmm. But I think for people that have never done a drug or taken a sip of alcohol in their life, I advocate that for making amends for human beings in general.
Exactly.
Don't carry that. Or if you need to apologize for something,
right,
or you need to forgive someone.
Exactly.
It is not worth carrying that around.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, yeah.
So this is, with you working in the field that you're in, I think this is a really important question. This is about you.
Okay.
What do you do to take care of yourself and prioritize your own wellness? Because the field and the specialty you're in can definitely lend themselves to burnout, compassion, fatigue, etc. Oh, yeah. What are your coping skills, your healthy coping skills look like?
When I was doing chaplaincy training, they would repeat a phrase a whole lot. That part of what we were expected to do was cultivate a tender heart and a thick skin. And so it might sound callous, and I don't mean it to be, but at the end of the day, I get to go home to my family.
And you have to leave that behind.
You do. So one of the things I do, I have a manila folder of all my clients, all my bereavement clients. I have, at the end of the day, it's almost like a bread box, but it's got a lid. And so I'll go through my list. I'll say, good night, people. I'll see you in the morning. And I put them in there and I close the lid.
It's a very symbolic thing that you do, where you're making a clear separation of your day.
Exactly. Very much. So when I am face-to-face or on the phone or Zoom, when I'm one-on-one with a client, I'll cry with you. I'm going to feel it. I mean, I can't help. My kids think it's funny sometimes. How many times at work did you cry today, Dad? But when I go home, it's not my burden to bear.
But you know what? That allows you to be a better version of the professional that is working with the clients, because you are making sure that your glass isn't emptied. You're able to refill it. So this is not just taking care of you and your kids, which Brent has 8 children, by the way. So that's incredible. I'm going to ask you a question about that here in a few minutes. But it allows you to be the best version of yourself for your clients.
Yes. So self-care. So for me, books, music, reading, family time. Years ago, I would have said exercise. I haven't been into that as much lately. I probably need to be. But when I was serving as a pastor, I developed the analogy. Train may not be the right word, but I pictured myself as the keeper of a well. And we train the people in our lives. Come to me when you're thirsty. Here, drink. And we can have the best relationships, the best spouse, the best kids, the best friends, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to fill that well for us.
True. And that's not their responsibility.
It's not their responsibility.
It is not my daughter's job to make me happy.
Exactly. So eventually, if we don't take care of that, we're going to start to scrape the bottom. And it's like scraping a raw nerve. And you're going to start to resent the very people you've told, come to me when you need something. So we've got to keep that well full. And this is a conversation I have with grievers all the time, because one thing I'll tell grievers is you are your priority. Every once in a while, I'll get a narcissistic client where I have to say, stop thinking of yourself so much. 8, 9 out of 10, though, I think people are generally givers. And when you tell a giver you are your priority, what are they going to say?
Oh, no. That's selfish.
Exactly.
I can't do that.
Exactly. So the way that I've come to understand it is we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. That so that is crucial, because it's not just narcissism, it's not pride, it's not arrogance, but I take care of myself so that I can pour out for other people.
It's that healthy balance.
Exactly.
One of the examples that I've heard of in parenting is, when you're on a plane and they're doing the safety check at the beginning and they're telling you, adults traveling with children, if the oxygen masks drop because of depressurization, put yours on first before you put your child's on.
Right.
As a parent, I don't need to tell you, it's our instinct to help your child immediately first.
Right.
Well, if we pass out from the depressurization, what good are we going to be to that child or to that client or to the spouse or whoever? So
self-care is huge for me.
And I love the list that you listed, because that sounds like a lot of mine: music, writing, books. You may have said art. I know that you do art.
I do.
You've done some pretty cool designs.
Thank you.
I just reminded myself of that.
I do.
So what is the most challenging aspect of your work, and what is the most rewarding part?
Oh, I think we just hit on one of the most challenging is not just self-care, but keeping those boundaries. When I first started getting into hospice, I would lay awake at night thinking about my clients. What can I do for them tomorrow? And so those emotionally appropriate boundaries are very difficult. Being with grieving and sad people all day long can be very heavy. That's a very challenging part of my job. The most rewarding, seeing people move through it in healthy ways. Seeing people grow through this process. It's all worth it.
That's a job where you go home at the end of the day and you say, what I did today mattered.
Yeah.
You're not helping some company increase their sales, from 89,000 to 101 in this time period.
Right.
And that's part of why I left the world that I was in for so long, related to the degree that I did get, which was journalism. And upon finding recovery, stumbled upon this world. But what I've done for the last 12 years is when I've gone to bed at night, I've said, wow, okay, this actually had a purpose. And we as human beings, we need to feel a sense of purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that we recommend for grievers all the time is find somewhere you can serve.
That's really important. I like that because I notice that when people lose someone, they want to do something.
Yeah.
There's this sometimes there's this surge of energy.
Yeah.
I've met so many parents that lost a child or had their child go through a crisis, and they go and they start a 501c3.
Right.
And I love that they direct that energy in that way. Mm-hmm. And there's almost like a restlessness, and I have to do something.
Right.
And if you help them direct it into serve others, they're going to find an outlet for that energy. Right. They're going to find the release that we talked about earlier, and they're going to find a purpose. And that helps toward that healing.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you a question about something I mentioned a few minutes ago. In addition to a bereavement counselor, former pastor, etc., you're also a dad. And you're not just a dad, but a father of 8, including 4 adopted children.
Yes.
So essentially, you're super dad. What led you to wanting to foster and adopt when you already had 4 boys? This may be a very long answer. We're kind of taking a 90-degree turn here.
No, it's not too long. We already touched on it. I'm a giver.
That's
My
true.
wife's a giver. It's just natural to us. At the time I was a pastor, foster care and adoption was something that I've always believed in. And so as a pastor, tried to make it a big deal. We had many, many foster parents in our church. And then my wife and I are ones to practice what we preach.
You really do. I said that earlier to my wife when I was coming here to interview you. I said, Brent puts his money where his mouth is.
Thank you.
You live what you advocate.
Thank you. So, yeah, we were telling others, love your neighbors, put others first. And so my wife and I decided this was a very practical way that we could do that. We never set out to be a big family. What was that TV show? 8 is enough. It is enough.
And you're at 10 now, right?
Well, total. 8 kids, 2 of us.
2 of you. But sometimes I count you among
we call
the
ourselves
kids.
the Thomas 10. Oh, yeah. I am one of the kids.
You are
too,
the oldest kid.
Yeah. So we started, my wife loves babies, so specialized in babies, and then ended up getting a call saying, oh, that baby has 3 siblings in foster care. Now, at the time, they said, don't worry, that foster home wants him. They want all 4 of them, but they're only licensed right now for 3. We're just going to amend their paperwork. We said, great. We'll even drive them over there, whatever. 9-10 months goes by, and during that time, parental rights on all 4 of them had been severed. So we started the process to adopt the baby boy that we were taking care of. They started the process to adopt his 2 brothers and sister. And somewhere in there, one of them ended up in the hospital with a broken femur.
Wow. Okay.
And nobody could really explain why, what happened. And so because there was no clear explanation, the ER doc said, I have to say non-accidental because they're in the system. And so that's how we ended up with his siblings.
Good. I mean, I'm not good why it happened, but that you did. Because what I've talked about on some of these prior episodes, and what I'm going to be talking about a lot down the road is, preventing these things that we're trying to keep youth from doing, getting addicted to drugs and alcohol, getting in unhealthy relationships, self-injuring, considering suicide, those things and whatever. The solution starts at home.
Absolutely.
And you are giving these kids that aren't even your biological children a loving, supportive environment. That's the solution. People ask me, how do we keep kids from doing X, Y, Z? The vast majority of it starts at home in a loving environment, a trauma-free environment.
Right.
So another question for you, what do you prioritize as a parent? What is most important to you in being a dad to your kids?
My kids love others. I mean, my wife, we were talking the other day about, pardon my language, but our own kids can be shits at home.
I think that any parent could say that.
I think that's universal.
Yeah, that's on their business cards.
It is, but we want to know what other people say about our kids. How do they interact with people when we're not around? That's really important to us. One of our home rules is in any sort of disciplinary situation, lying gets you double punishment.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
I want them to be people of their word. I want them to help put others first. Those are what we prioritize. I want to raise kind people.
I've told my daughter that if you make a mistake, even a big one, come to me and tell me. And the first thing I'm going to say to you is, I'm so proud of you for coming to me. Thank you. Doesn't mean that there's not accountability later.
Right.
But I've explained, and I'm tying this into what you said about lying, that lying, when we get into deception, That is a really unhealthy habit to develop in childhood. I've seen adults that can't seem to get rid of it. I mean, and that's just, that is concerning right there.
Yes.
So what do you find most challenging as a parent, and what do you love most about being a dad?
Kids can be shit.
By the way, let me go back to that. You reminded me of a point I wanted to make.
Yeah.
I've read literature that says that kids that are awesome people out in the world that sometimes kind of unravel a little bit at home, not to where it's like, constant defiance or whatever.
Right.
That feel they can do that at home, but they don't do that out in the world. That's actually a good sign, because they feel like they can maybe have a bit of a meltdown at home. They know they're safe to do that. Right. But then you see how they're out in the world and you're like, wow, they're super nice to this, library clerk or whatever. So anyway, you answered what's most challenging. What do you love most about?
It's the same as with my work, just watching them grow, watching them take on responsibility, strive for themselves when they're kind. Just watching them grow up is priceless.
That's really cool. I like that. One thing I know about you as a father is you let your kids be exactly who they are.
We try.
I think of two of your sons and they seem very different from one another.
Absolutely.
But they both seem healthy and happy and well-adjusted, good human beings. And I love that you're like, okay, we've checked off what really matters here. Outside of that, you be you.
Yeah.
And that's probably why you have the healthy relationship that you do, because you're not trying to force them into some kind of box.
No. We, the way we view it is we are helping them discover and practice who they are.
I love it. I'm going to help you find who you are.
Exactly.
And what you love to do, I'm going to support you in that
So
thing.
it's not up to us to say, hey, you're playing basketball this season. It's up to them.
That's what made me so happy. When I was a kid, I wanted to play Little League. My dad said, okay, let's get you in Little League. He came to all my games. At the end of the season, he's like, you want to do Little League again? No, I don't. I want to go into Cub Scouts. We went into Cub Scouts. He became a den leader, which he was not the biggest fan of other people's kids. So for him to become like a scout leader, he really loved me.
There you rest.
And then when I was done, he's, we did it for a few years. I'm like, I don't think I want to do it anymore. And it's like, I think back to the Little League example. I saw so many other kids whose dads were clearly vicariously living through the kids, screaming at them after the game, you struck out 3 times or whatever. And it's like, everything I know about parenting now, it's like, wow, that's the polar opposite of what we need to be doing.
Exactly. Yeah, you know me. I'm not a sports guy.
No, you are not.
But
you have a son who is an athlete.
Our second oldest son started football in 5th grade and ended up being high school linebacker of the year. I never missed a game.
Wow.
And I don't like football.
No, you might not even know what's going on, but you're like, that's my son out there.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned.
You had to after
I learned
that
it
much
all,
time.
but it's not my favorite. But
See,
I
that's
didn't miss
so
a game.
cool. It's not your thing, but it doesn't matter. It's not your thing, but it's your son.
Right.
That's what mattered. So that leads me into, we only got a couple more questions here.
Sure.
What would your biggest suggestion or encouragement to other parents out there be? This is a broad question.
It is.
If you were to distill it down, what would your advice to parents be?
I think decide, like we were talking about, what do you want for your kids? What's your approach going to be? I think have some discussions, have some introspection about that. What do you want for your kids? Then be patient. Give yourself and them some grace. Just elevate love.
I like that you said be patient with them and yourself. We are not given a manual. Right. I mean, there's plenty of parenting books out there, but there is no hey, here's the foolproof checklist right here.
Right.
I also like what you just said ties into you talking earlier about all manner of things where you have to be intentional, you have to be mindful. Be mindful of what is it that you even want for them and what do they want for themselves.
Exactly. What is your goal in parenting?
If we haven't sat down and defined that, we might not even be able to answer that question.
Right.
So take the time and do that.
Right.
So we haven't gotten into any of this question with any of our previous guests because it didn't feel right given the subject matter, even though you and I did talk about grief and bereavement.
Right.
And that can be a heavy topic. We've smiled through this whole thing as we should through life.
Yes.
But it feels appropriate to ask you this question. We're sitting here in the studio. There's album cover artwork up on the wall. Music is such a huge part of my life. It's a big part of your life.
Yes.
You grieved this question before we got into the interview. This is the one thing you pointed to on the list. But I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
If you had to narrow it down, what are your 3 favorite albums of all time? You've had this question list for a week.
I know. And you know how many different lists I've had in my mind?
So your answer now will probably be maybe be different in a month from now. So what is your answer now?
What I'm going to say right now. See, it just changed again.
It literally in the last 5 seconds.
It's more of an EP, but an accidental case of memory. No, hold on. I can't remember the name of it. Eluvium. It's a solo piano album, an accidental memory in the case of death.
A track from Eluvium ended up on a down-tempo or ambient compilation I had.
Okay, so there's also a solo piano album, and it's one of my favorites.
So what was the title again?
An accidental memory in the case of death.
Okay, by Eluvium.
Eluvium.
Okay, number 2. And by the way, these don't have to be in order.
No, right. And yeah, this list is always subject to change.
In the last 20 seconds.
Yes. Oh my gosh. How about Cake?
Ooh.
By the Trash Can Sinatras, not the band.
Oh, okay. I was like,
nope.
Because I wouldn't picture you as a fan of Cake the band.
They're okay.
The first album with Rock and Roll Lifestyle, Mr. Mastodon Farm. Mm-hmm. By the way, the production on it is like there's no low end whatsoever.
It's not. Yeah, it's not well. I mean, they're okay.
So Cake by Trash Can Sinatras.
Trash Can Sinatras.
And number 3.
I'm going to go with a comfort album. And it's 2 EPs put together, but it's Skittish and Rockity Roll by Mike Doughty. Yeah.
Oh,
that's a comfort album.
I think that's the one that has No Peace Los Angeles on it.
Yes.
Okay, that song, No Peace Los Angeles by Mike Doughty, is a song that when I was really heavily caught up in my addiction and wanting to stop and desperately wanting to ask for help and whatever, you talk about a comfort album, that song. That is, and you know what? Down in the show notes for this, I'll have to link to like the YouTube, link of that. It's that Skittish Rockity Roll is an incredible album.
It is.
And it's just Mike and his semi-detuned guitar,
right?
He
was trying to find his way out of soul coughing, out of his own addictions. And it's not quite what you would call a folk album, but it's a guy with a guitar.
Yeah, it's like kind of punk folk, anti-folk, lo-fi folk.
Right.
Like it's something.
It's Mike Doughty's version of folk, I think.
Oh, see, I love that you hit on that one that resonates with me.
That's where I'm going to land right now.
And now I'm going to have to check out the other 2.
Yes.
Finally, is there anything else you'd like to add or anything I may have overlooked? Speaking of broad questions.
Right. No, I can't think of anything. It's just great to see you and connect again.
It is. This was a fun conversation. I mean, people are going to hear that, obviously. Before we sign off here, I wanted to say to the listeners who have been listening to the first few episodes, thank you so much for the feedback. Thanks for the emails, texts, and comments on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. It means a lot to me. And thank you to those who have suggested topics and guests for future episodes. Once again, our guest today has been Brent Thomas. Brent is a family man, former pastor and chaplain, music lover, book absorber, and bereavement counselor. Brent, this has been absolutely fantastic. I haven't seen you in 13 years, but what a way to catch up. Thank you.
It was great. Thank you so much.
Thanks once again to our guest, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media and with your personal network. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to suggest a guest or topic for a future episode, please email us at podcast@silverladder.com. If you need resources related to mental health support or treatment, please visit silverladder.com and select Resources from the toolbar menu. And finally, if you have questions about or are interested in setting up a presentation, consulting, peer support, or family support services, please email contact@silverladder.com. Please note that Silver Ladder is not a crisis resource and is not staffed or monitored 24/7. Thank you for listening to Silver Ladder.